In this video, I have a productive and friendly debate with my friend and colleague, Daniel Harris. In this video, we talk about the nature of time as well as the nature of the present. We have a long debate on whether the concept of the present applies only locally or if it applies across the entire universe. This debate brings up many details about physical issues in special relativity, as well as the measurement of the one-way speed of light. So you're going to gain a lot of very important physics knowledge from this debate as a side quest. We also debate the existence of the ether and whether the existence of the ether is proven, as well as the existence of a preferred frame. And as we talk about all of these issues, we are constantly referencing important epistemological issues which condition all of these. So on all of these fronts, I think you're going to learn a lot from this debate. We certainly learned a lot from one another, so I hope you'll enjoy it. All right, thanks for joining me again, Dan. So we're gonna have a friendly debate here, and a truth-seeking debate, which should not be too hard for the two of us because we agree on so much, and I think we'll be able to teach one another and the audience some things through the course of our disagreements. Let's start with something that we probably have like a high level of agreement on, which is the nature of time. So go ahead and state your view on the nature of time, and I suspect I'll fully agree with this.
Sure. So time is the interval over which change occurs. That's the formal definition I've arrived at. It's not my definition. I found it through research, and it's, I guess, a fairly common definition for those that think that time is not really a thing. It's a consequence of change. So it's it's common in that there are other people that believe in it, but I don't think it's the pervasive view. Like it's not
Yeah.
the popular view. And so I think going into kind of the popular view or some examples might be helpful to contrast it, if that'll be helpful.
Yeah,
So,
please.
Einstein, I think, famously mentioned that time is that which clocks measure. And, it's circular, right? But I think what he was trying to get at is it's a difficult thing to define. And I think also that with the hypothetical deductive method, they like to come up with postulates or definitions up front and then derive the consequences. And so they wanted like a nice formal definition of time. Whereas time being the interval of change, arriving at that definition from from an inductive point of view takes on like a reductionist approach, like the objectivist reductionist approach, where you reduce it to observable concretes and see if you can sort of re-induce the concepts. So, I think Ayn Rand liked to ask questions like, what facts of reality give rise to such a concept as the interval over which change occurs? And I believe it's a causal understanding of the way things work. And so when things change, they go from state A to state B.
Mm-hmm.
If it happened where it was overlapping, you'd have a contradiction. Where you would have it at both state A and not A. It would be a state A and B at the same time.
Okay.
And so, like, there needs to be some interval over change where it's in mutually exclusive states as it progresses from one state to the other. Also, I think when it comes to measuring time, the second fact is that that the same setup, the same conditions leads to the same interval over which change occurs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes a useful tool for measuring other changes, like
Mm.
how long it takes to cook certain foods, how long do I have until my next meeting, and how long until the satellite reaches overhead and I can use it, things like that. So like the regular change because of the same conditions. And it kind of gets interesting when you get into relativity because the conditions are changing, and how are they changing? What does time dilation mean? These are all interesting questions you can pursue once you have a good definition of time and what it's doing and why
Yeah.
we know it.
I think we agree on everything I agree with everything you just said so far. I would add something else, which is I'll add something about my understanding of time. When we ask what time is it, and someone answers it's this time, what that always means is you're always making reference to the state of some entity or entities. So, what time is it? It's 4 o'clock. What does that mean? It means this one entity, a clock, is saying four on it right now. Okay, to put it bluntly, or to put it crudely, a different. It's bedtime. It's the time where everyone's in bed. So like you're properly speaking, you're referring to the state of some entity in its process of change. You're
That's
saying
right.
you're giving, when you say it's this time, or when you say, let's see, um, you know, I made the bed at this time. You're saying when this entity, me, was doing a thing, it was doing that thing uh when, see, I'm a little uncomfortable with using the word when here, but we'll talk about that later. I was doing that thing when the clock said 9 p.m. Okay? I suspect that if we get deeper into this, we're gonna, this part of my, even though you're nodding your head, I suspect we're gonna get into some disagreement as a result of what I just said here.
Hmm.
Um, so we've established some basis of agreement. Let's get into some topics where we disagree.
Okay.
You, in some of your papers, you've talked about, and I'll make some papers some of your papers available to the audience, linking on YouTube. And Dan, I especially would want you, any paper in some of your papers, you've brought up the concept of universal presentism. Okay, and this is a subject where I disagree with you definitely right now. But please send me any paper where you use this concept so that our audience can read your paper on your paper that includes this concept. So let's start with you telling us what universal presentism is and why you think it's a thing.
Okay. I think I mentioned it being a universal simultaneity, which is the
Okay, yeah,
same
maybe
kind
I
of
didn't
thing.
say it right, but
And
yeah, yeah.
so the idea of relative simultaneity is a concept that comes out of relativity. And in my research, I was trying to reduce it through a process of reduction. Like, where does this concept come from? And it ultimately comes from a consequence of one of special relativity's postulates, which is the light postulate, that the speed of light is constant in all frames, all inertial frames. And so if you have, can I draw on my board here?
Yeah.
So if you have two guys going at each other at some relative velocity, and they each shine a flashlight at the other. Okay, so it's like a beam of, let's say, pink light, right? And they're both shining pink light at the other. Now, the speed of light of any of these relative to any observer is going to be constant, a constant c, according to relativity. And the consequence is, if you work out, I guess, the logic and some of the math involved, is that simultaneity becomes a observation based, like a reference frame based concept. There is no universal simultaneity under this concept. So it's all based, like, if the speed of light wasn't constant for every observer, then out then the relativity of simultaneity comes into question, because that's the root, that's the base. So if you were able to find like a preferred frame, which hopefully we'll talk about later, um, then the relativity of simultaneity goes out the window. So universal simultaneity or universal presentism is the concept that the universe exists on a single plane of existence at all times. So it's presentism is a philosophical belief. It's like an official term, I think, for those that believe there's only the present that exists. The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. It's just the present, and the past represents a previous configuration that the present used to have, and the future is a possible configuration that the present could have or eventually will have if it becomes the future. And so that's sort of the concepts involved and the relation to other, relative simultaneity versus universal simultaneity. That's like the difference. Um, yeah. So we can get into like more into some of the observations that might support one or the other. But that's the gist of it.
Right. Okay. So that's good because you've established some of the facts that lead me to my disagreement with you. So 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 Dan's talking about the relativity of simultaneity that comes from special relativity. Now, and he's saying that that relativity of simultaneity comes from the assumption that light goes the same speed in every frame. Now, let's establish a couple of things real quick. Number one, the idea that light goes a particular speed, the idea that the one way speed of light is a particular value has never been observed. So
No.
this is yeah. So this is number one, this has never been experimentally verified. We've never measured the one-way speed of light. If you don't believe me, type this in. Just type in one-way speed of light and you'll see a Veritasium video on this that's gotten 25 billion views. Every single human being on the planet has watched this video at least 4 times. So you should watch it too. No, I'm serious. I mean, like, it's just a lot of views. I mean, it's a very, and well deserved. It's a very good video. It really, like, explains the issue well.
They did a really good job with it.
Yeah, it's a great video, and it'll explain to you. You might be, what the heck? Like, if you don't believe me that they've never measured the speed of light going in one direction, you got to watch the video so that you can be convinced of this very important fact.
Yep. Yeah, that's important to understand to like kind of integrate all the rest of it together. It's an important fact
if you don't, if this is a key fact that has conditions the position we're at epistemologically with respect to these issues. If you don't understand this, if you don't understand that we've never measured the speed of light, you're really lost. And unfortunately, it's worth noting that a lot of modern physicists don't know this. They don't, or maybe they know it, but they don't understand all the consequences of it. Is the normal thing I see with physicists is like they know this, but they don't realize how it means relativity just has never been supported with evidence, basically.
At its foundation.
Yeah, at its foundation. Yeah, right.
There's a belief at the very base that which other conclusions are based on. That if you remove that keystone, the whole thing needs to be shifted.
Yeah.
Right? The observations need to be explained some other way. The reasoning for the observations are wrong.
Right.
If that keystone is removed.
Now, another thing that needs to be brought up here is that this assumption is not only unproven, but it is patently absurd. The idea that light goes the same speed with respect to all observers, regardless of how fast those observers are going, just blatantly violates the basics of what it means to move around. Now, I'm open to the idea that there's some additional fact that's going on here that changes the normal rules of what it means for one object to move with respect to another object. But that there is no evidence for such a bizarre new thing going on. This is just a postulate. They haven't given evidence for the idea that this is what's actually going on.
Right. And just to be clear, postulate, as my understanding, is an assumption that you start with so that you can deduce consequences. It's the hypothetical deductive method's foundation.
Yes. Now, but I agree that is what they mean by a postulate. And what they would say, because they use the hypothetico-deductive method, they would say that the justification for this postulate, they would admit, yeah, I know it hasn't been proven. I know it's a little wacky, but when you assume this, you're able to explain all the observations. Fine.
Right.
It is consistent with all the observations, but you are completely glossing over the fact that there are a bazillion other ways to think about it. Literally a bazillion other ways to think about it. There's an infinite number of other ways to think about it where that still explain the observations. Okay? And what am I talking about? Um, I'm talking about variable speed of light theories, okay? And these are covered in Dialect's video, which I will link in the description, okay? And Dialect's a very good physics YouTube channel. If you haven't watched it, watch it because it's fantastic. Dialect explains that um, if you, instead of assuming the speed of light goes the same speed for all observers, if you presume that it goes a different speed in different directions, and you adjust that speed using a value called epsilon, there's literally an infinite number of epsilon values you can choose that still get the right result. So there's literally an infinite number of other interpretations or other conventions, really, because we don't know the one-way speed of light. So you could argue, well, we have to synchronize our clock based on some kind of convention. And there's a limited but still infinite number of conventions which still yield the right predictions. So you can't argue that this postulate is like the only way to explain the results. That would offer a certain plausibility to the absurd hypothesis, but it just doesn't. Even on its own, first of all, it doesn't prove it because I just don't agree with the hypothetico-deductive method. But even based on the mainstream way of thinking about this, it is just not the only thing it's not the only way to think about this to still get the results, to still get the right results.
Right. I would go as far as saying that it's also um, counter to certain inductions you make with the available evidence. So
Mm.
like
Yes.
so like the speed of light being constant for all observers leads to relativity of simultaneity, but I believe that is contrary to the available evidence. I don't believe there is any evidence to suggest there's zero evidence to suggest that simultaneity is relative. Um, there is evidence to say that we don't know which events are simultaneous at any distance, but that's not to say that they're not simultaneous for everybody, right? Whatever the simultaneity is what it is, but we might not know what it is.
Yeah.
Because once you get into like relativity simultaneity, weird things start happening. Like for three people in the same space, they may have a different three different simultaneities that suggest that a distant flower is both, or I'm sorry, all three, a seed in bloom and dead, like gone through its life cycle, and that clearly like violates anything we've actually interacted with. Like there's zero evidence to suggest that, well, when I'm present with the flower, it's all three at the same time. It's only ever one, and so you get contrary evidence indirectly, and it's very akin to like object permanence, which is a concept that infants learn when your mother goes away. Like she doesn't just disappear; she's somewhere else, existing, and then she comes back, and she never disappeared. It's not like she disappeared and reappeared, and that's a concept infants, I believe, get at some point. Um, and so for like universal simultaneity, it's similar. It's like I can exist with any other existent and only exist in a single plane. Like we're only ever existing in a single plane of existence. When I leave that entity, there's no reason for me to think that it's still not existing in some single plane of existence when I'm gone. That's like it's
Mm.
akin to object permanence in that regard.
Mm.
Um, and then when I come back, it's still a single plane of existence. And so I believe with relativity of simultaneity, they kind of get this concept mixed up with the fact that because the speed of light is constant, they have this what's called proper time, which is to say that every entity has its own measure of time and they're all correct. So like if a twin in the twins paradox were to go away and come back, he aged or she aged less. Uh, so how long did that trip take? What was it? 2 years or 10 years? It was both. And it depends on your simultaneity lines as to like the explanation for what's happening according to relativity. Whereas if you have this universal simultaneity view, what's happening is the aggregate time, the aggregate interval of change for the moving twin is just less. And so like it's a way to integrate both the definition of time, the observations that everything is that you ever interact with is ever present, even this video, like we're recording it right now, but when other people watch it later, they're watching in the present data from a server that exists right now, and it stored what had happened, what the state of the universe was when we were recording it. And so like they're retrieving the data in the present. And the concept about the past is our ability to understand that this isn't currently happening. Like if you showed a video to maybe a cave person, they might think, oh my God, this person's on this screen and it's really happening, as opposed to being a recording. Recording wouldn't have occurred to a cave person. But to us, having these concepts well developed, like we know it's the past. And so yeah, like it's just it integrates the concept of time, universal simultaneity, and presentism, and what it then points to is like, okay, why do we believe the speed of light is constant for every inertial observer? Is there another way to explain things? And you said yes, there is a different way to explain things where the speed of light is maybe constant in a preferred frame. We can discuss what that might mean later. And then as you're moving within the preferred frame, the speed of light relative to you might be different one direction to the next. And that's kind of what Dialect was getting at with his variable speed of light approach to explaining special relativity.
Yeah, in that video, Dialect has a very intriguing notion where we choose different values of epsilon for different observers, and by doing this, it achieves two things. Number one, in line with what you're saying, it actually brings to these phenomena a notion of absolute universal simultaneity, which I'm sure you're a big fan of. Second, something that I'm a big fan of is that this presumes that the speed of light is constant in only one particular frame. And now, I have not proven this to myself, but I find it very likely that because light is a wave in the ether, whatever the ether rest frame is, if such a concept is even applicable to the ether, whatever the ether rest frame is, light is constant in that rest frame because light is a wave of that frame, of that entity. This is exactly how sound works. Sound goes the speed of sound with respect to the rest frame of the air, because it is a wave in that air. The cause of that's a little subtle, but that we're just going to say that for now. So that is a good
Dialect had a time dilation video that using sound wave mechanics.
Yeah.
Yes. And it only is applicable to things that exist in the sound. Like things can go faster than sound because not everything is sound, right? So like sound is a special emergence property of gaseous liquids and even like solids. Like you can have sounds travel through solid. And so, but given just the mechanics of the wave nature of sound, like he was able to create a sound clock and show that it dilated when it moved through the medium of that sound is operating in.
So yeah, and I will link to that sound clock video as well. Another great video by Dialect. Now you believe in a universal present, in a universal present, but you admit that with our current understanding, we don't know what that universal present is. So I'll give an example. Let's say I look through my telescope, a very powerful telescope, at Alpha Centauri, and I can see that they just launched their first spacecraft. Okay, and they have to be a very powerful telescope, and I can see. And so what I can say is, hey, Alpha Centauri is 4 light years away. So the launch, so it took light 4 years for that news to reach us.
Did it?
So, what's that?
Did it?
Yeah, now that's my point. I'm just giving the naive view first.
Right.
So the naive view is, so what I could say is that spacecraft launch was simultaneous with the height of COVID. And for me personally, when I was writing my theory of induction. So I could imagine looking at the whole universe and saying, at this particular moment, in the universal sense of the present, I was writing my book on induction, and the Alpha Centaurians finally made it to space for the first time. Maybe we say that. Okay, but we don't actually know the one-way speed of light, so we don't know if it took that particular amount of time to reach us. So you acknowledge
Right.
that, but you still think that there's a universal, there's some answer to the question, what was happening on Alpha Centauri when James was writing his book? You think there is an answer to that question?
Right. So yes, I believe that there are events. I mean, because the universe only exists on a single plane, like there's no choice in the matter. Everything is simultaneous. But in order to know which events are simultaneous, you would have to have a model for which the speed transfers from one event to the next. And
Yeah.
that's the model for the speed of light. And you you don't know which frame in which the speed of light is c in all directions. You only are able to measure like round trips effectively. So
Yes.
like one of the things I would have liked to have covered in our if we can go back is like why do people believe the speed of light is constant in all directions? Like they're not getting it out of nowhere. They are referencing some evidence and some factual basis. Like and it's their experiments. If you look up the one way speed of light, boils down to an average of two way. And so if it goes slow in one direction and fast in the other, the average is out the speed of light, right? So that they're measuring the two way, and it appears to be constant in all directions. And
The
they're
two-way
also
speed of light is indeed constant in all directions in all frames of reference, right?
it's measured to be constant.
Yeah,
It's it
yes. The two-way speed.
uh,
Yeah.
right. If you look at the Lorentzian approach to special relativity phenomenon, it's not constant.
Right.
It's
Right.
because you have length contraction, it takes less time to traverse the distance. So
Of
the
course.
slower
Yes.
two-way isn't really detected because of length contraction.
Yeah.
Uh, and um, and so like the two-way speed of light is measured to be constant. And so they just, well, why don't we just make it constant and see what happens? And that's sort of the basis of Einstein's approach to his special relativity is like, well, let's just call a duck a duck. You know, if it quacks, you know, moves like a duck. Let's just, the speed of light is constant. But it's never observed. And then
Yeah.
any one-way measurement requires synchronizing clocks, which requires a synchronization scheme, which requires at this point anyway, an assumption of the speed of light, so you can sync the signals at a distance, which bakes into your synchronization, your speed of light scheme. You could assume anisotropic, which is different speeds, and you would find that your experiments at a distance confirm that, or you can assume isotropic, which is the same speed, and your experiments using your one-way measurements would confirm that because the way you synchronized bakes in the assumption. Um, and so that's the evidence for that's built into the assumption that the speed of light is constant. Is that the two ways are measured to be constant, and then if they synchronize their clocks making that assumption, it confirms the assumption. And so it's never really grounded in like direct observation, like the Veritasium video shows. But these people aren't grading it from nowhere; they're not just
Yeah.
making wild guesses. Um, and so the getting into like the preferred, like we can't really know which plane is simultaneous, like which series of events is simultaneous because we don't, just like them, we don't have accurate measurements of one-way speed of light. Everybody, both the people that believe in a preferred frame and that the speed of light is anisotropic and those that believe it's an isotropic, none of us have an accurate one-way measurement of the speed of light. It's impossible at this point. And so yes, the entire plane of existence is simultaneous, but we don't know which one it is. So your distant Alpha Centauri event versus your COVID and development of your book, could they be simultaneous? Sure, it's plausible, but we just don't have enough information. I think it's important to separate like what is known epistemologically versus what is possible physically. So
yeah, okay, that's a very good. Okay, yeah. So I think we've clarified a lot of very important issues here, and now it's finally time for me to disagree with you. This has been the most agreeable debate in the history of man so far. So I will finally, at long last, disagree with you. Now, when you say that everything exists on a plane simultaneously, I think you're making the same mistake that that mainstream culture makes when thinking about time, where they think about time as this dimension, basically a spatial dimension that things are moving through. When you say that's a plane, you're making reference to an idea of there's this plane that's 3D, and then that plane progresses in a fourth dimension where it changes. I don't want to say that. I want to say there's just 3 dimensions, there's objects in 3 dimensions, and they change. Now, if you think of it this way, then I think time and time has to mean what was the condition of one thing when another thing was happening, okay? Now, so like again, that was my understanding of like what time is it. Now, I think you can only answer that question. What was this thing like when this other thing was happening? You can only answer that question for objects that can affect one another. Okay? And for this, we have to bring in another principle, which is the principle of locality. This principle states that as far as we know, one entity can only influence another entity when it's next to that entity. Okay? So for example, these 2 objects can only affect one another once they actually make contact. Now you might say, wait a second, James, what about gravity? What about electromagnetic forces? Like, that's over a distance. Yeah, it's over a distance, but we know from the evidence that these forces propagate outward from a position. They have some kind. Now, we don't know what the speed of light is, but we know it has some particular speed. It takes time to spread out. And so that shows us that these effects that act over a distance are actually just a series of one thing acting on the next thing, acting on the next thing, acting on the next. And all of those actions are local. It is right. Actually, they're all local actions. So so we've confirmed that as far as we can tell, there is no such thing as a non-local action. Entanglement might be an exception, but I haven't figured that out, and I don't think anyone has proven that is a non-local action yet. So the law of locality is still a general principle of existence. We have found that to be the case. And as a result of this, I would say that simultaneity is only defined with respect to objects that are next to one another. When you say that one object has a particular condition at the same time as another object has a given condition, the only way that has meaning is with respect to 2 objects that are next to one another. So I'll give some examples. Let's see. So, the steak was medium rare when I ate it. Okay? So, like, the reason that makes sense is because first of all, the steak is acting on me, and I was pleased by the steak instead of being disgusted by it. Like, instead of it being cooked too much and it's just shoe leather and I hate it. So it's the proper level of cookedness, and it was that way at the time I put it in my mouth. So what do we mean by at the time? It's All I'm saying is, when I say at that time, that means nothing more than the state of other entities that my body could have acted upon, or that could have acted upon my body. So I ate the steak at 4 o'clock. What does that mean? It means the clock had this particular state and it was acting on me in a 4 o'clock kind of way. Maybe I was looking at the clock while eating. It acted on my eyeballs in a particular 4 o'clock kind of way when I was in the eating state. Further, the steak was in a particular state, the state of being medium rare, when I was in the eating state, and therefore was able to act on me in that particular way. But let's try to extend this to the Alpha Centauri situation. While I'm writing my book, Alpha Centauri achieved its first space flight. No, I don't think there's any basis on which to make that statement, even if we knew the one-way speed of light. Now we can say that the light reached us, September 16th, 2025. We can certainly say that because now we're talking about the bits of ether that are right next to our eyeballs, and that bit of ether acted on us in a particular way, delivering the news of what happened on Alpha Centauri. That's simultaneous with our current state. But we can't say that my writing the book was simultaneous with the space flight, because the concept of simultaneity just doesn't mean anything for events that are not co-located. That's my view. I don't see any evidence that simultaneity ought to mean that. So what would you say to this argument?
I feel like you're almost saying the same thing I am, it's just in different terms. And
Okay.
maybe we're talking past each other potentially.
Okay.
So let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. So I hear you to say, cause-effect relationships are local.
Yes.
And maybe a potential counterexample, which I don't think is one, is entanglement, which
Yeah.
just only thing it shows is that two things are correlated at a distance, which there's
Yeah.
no
I
magic
don't know
in
what
that.
to make of entanglement yet.
Yeah, there's no magic in that. So, um, I mean, I agree with that. I don't think that there's any evidence to suggest that it's any different. Like all the evidence, every bit of it suggests that things are happening locally.
Mm.
Entities act on others locally. They call that, I guess, local causality, which is kind of like a standard for a theory that's going to be taken seriously today. And I happen to agree with that standard. I think Newton agreed with this standard. I think he was uncomfortable with gravity because it appeared to act instantaneously when the object was moving. Like you had moving objects, and it's like, how does the gravity affect instantaneously when I'm moving? Like, it seems as though it's acting at a distance, right? And there might be some wave mechanics involved that Dialect mentioned, where you could have a moving electric field, and it because of the wave nature of things, it's as though everything at a distance knows where the thing is at instantaneously, but it just happens to be in the wave mechanics of the medium that the EM object is operating in.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you're gonna find disagreement with me with that. And does simultaneity, like when you say it doesn't mean anything, like there's no definition. Like I would agree that there is no definition of what is simultaneous in the sense that like
I'm not saying it doesn't mean anything. I'm saying it doesn't apply to certain situations.
okay, so like
It does mean something very important,
events
but
at
it
a
only
distance,
applies locally.
like they're not interacting with each other. They interact with their environment, which may send signals that interact with the nearby environment until the signal eventually arrives, and then you have to have some model of the signal propagation to understand how long it took, how many changes on your side took for that signal to arrive from where it started. And then you, like, I don't, like, I heard you say that if you knew the one way speed of light, simultaneity, like, two distant events would still have no simultaneous definition or meaning. Is that, did I?
I if you knew the one-way speed of light, I think you might be able to extend the concept of simultaneity in a certain way and say, because I know that the signal went a certain speed, I know that they achieved spaceflight at the same time as writing my book. But that would be a different extended sense of simultaneity, not the base core sense of simultaneity that applies only to objects next to one another.
So we know what's happening next to one another because, I mean,
Because there's no propagation
there's
time.
no propagation, so there's no separation in the present. They're all present, right? They're present locally and they're present temporally. Really,
I would go further
what's
than that
happening?
though. Go
What?
ahead.
It's I think what I think the wrinkle comes in when you're talking about two events and we don't know what's happening in between, right? We don't have a good understanding or knowledge of what's exactly happening in between that prevents us from relating distant events temporally. Like, how many changes ago was this distant event taking place? I don't know what's happening in between and how the signal is getting to me. Therefore, I can't state with certainty as to when that was. You might be able to say I have upper and lower limits, but as the distance grows, that error bound increases. Um, all right, so you were about to say something that maybe it was clarifying.
Yeah, yeah. So it's it's not. Let's see. You're saying that like the only reason we can talk about what's simultaneous is local is based on the fact that like otherwise there's like a propagation lag time.
Right.
That's not the only reason I'm defining simultaneity in this highly limited way.
Okay.
I'm defining it in this highly limited way because, again, when we say it's this time, we're saying event A happened. Hold on. We're saying that an entity had a certain state when another entity had some certain state.
Right.
What does when mean here? It means that one entity could have acted on the other entity in accordance with that one state. So let me make this concrete because otherwise this is horrendously abstract and hard to follow. So, going back to a previous example, I ate the steak at 4 o'clock. What does that mean? It means when I was in the state of enjoying a steak, the clock was in a 4 o'clock state. What does when mean here? It means the clock acted on my eyeballs in a 4 o'clock kind of way when I was in the steak enjoying state. Like those, I was affected by the clock. The state of
Yeah.
me was affected by a clock and steak eating. That is the way I was at
So
that process in my process of change. And
the
that's the
state.
basis on which we say that the steak and the 4 o'clock were at the same time. That's what at the same time means, is nothing more than I was affected. My state right now is a result of both things both things.
Both things are interacting at the same moment. They
Well,
both
notice how
existed.
I'm dancing around words like moment and at the same time because I'm trying to explain what moments are and what
So I
at
don't
the
think you
same
have to
time
dance
is. And
around
I'm
that
trying.
concept when things just exist. Like it's just it becomes a matter of like what was the state in the past. But like when you say in this moment, it like that's not like a to me it's not a temporal thing in the sense that like you're relating time. It's a state of existence. Like this is where I'd
Yes.
like to tie into like objectivism. Existence exists. Period. And while that's a big generalization, and how it applies specifically to sciences is something that needs to be discovered. Um, in this particular case, how you would apply it to presentism is that things just exist. That's it. There's only a single plane of existence, and I don't mean plane like geometrically. I use that to just like as like a concept, like there isn't like a moment where things are like existing forward or backwards relative to you and in different places and relative to each other. Like things just exist across the entire universe. That's it. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
like as you're sitting here talking to me, like right now, things just exist. Boom, in whatever state they are. They are just whatever they are. And you know, relating like, okay, when we were having this conversation, what was happening in Alpha Centauri, like we don't know, but something was happening over there at this time, in this moment, in this part where we're currently existing, right? So like I feel like time uh becomes a concept that is then used to explain change relative to change. Like so like time becomes like how if there's a single plane of existence, it's obviously not static. Like things are evolving in this as things exist, they evolve. Like things are changing. Um, and then time becomes a concept to kind of quantify and explain one change relative to another. Like, oh, these number turns of a sundial, or number turns of a sand hourglass. Excuse me. Then my coffee became cold. Like that explains the change of the coffee in terms of an hourglass. So I understand how maybe good this cup is at insulating. Um, and then um, and so like when it comes to like your concept of extending time, like if we had an understanding of the dynamics of light, like if we knew the one-way speed of light, then we can understand what states things are in at a distance from an earlier state that it used to exist. Like, okay, I know that from Alpha Centauri it took maybe 10 minutes, and then from this other direction it took what I thought was like 2 light years, and it ended up taking 100. So like I can then say, okay, 10 minutes ago I was in this state, meaning when I looked at my mechanical watch or whatever, when it was in a process of 10 minutes, when it's in a state where it was 10 minutes ago, I would know what the light I'm seeing from Alpha Centauri, how that maps to my prior state of existence. So it becomes a mapping of like what things used to be in versus what things are now, when things were simultaneously in the same uh, plane of existence, when they all existed at the same time in that state. Like it becomes a mapping at that point. We don't have that mapping, and so I agree with you that to talk about it now is arbitrary. Can I take a break real quick?
it's not arbitrary because you're saying it exists. It just so happens we just don't know exactly what it is. We don't know its nature.
Arbitrary in the sense like to discuss the light model and to say it's this speed. Like it's at this point it's
Yeah,
arbitrary.
we don't know, but
We
it's
don't know.
something. Is what you're saying?
It
It's
is
something. We don't know
something,
what it
but
is, but it's something. It has to exist, and it has to
correct.
be something.
Correct.
Yeah,
Like I feel like we need to follow the evidence as far as it goes and no further,
right.
and we should not ignore evidence. Like we should take it as far as it allows us.
Yeah,
And I believe
I
Newton and Bacon believed that. I
yes,
need to take a
and
break for a second. Is that all right?
no.
Oh, come on. I'll be I'll be
Yeah, yeah,
I'll be
yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
I'll just cut it. So in my view, what I'm also trying to adhere to this standard of like go as far as the evidence can possibly take you, but no further. And in that light, I don't think we can go quite as far as you think we can. Because I mean, I don't know how I'd phrase it, but like it doesn't, I don't think the evidence supports a view of the present that extends past immediate actions. Because I think that the concept of time or the phenomena of time is nothing more than a result of the fact of change and the fact of entities acting on one another. And as I've said a couple times already, as a result of these two facts, when we say, what time is it? We're just talking about the way one state of an entity is affecting your state. And the only entities can affect your state is the entities that are right next to you. Okay, now, So, for example, and now we can extend this sense of the present. We can extend this sense of the present for entities that are not right next to you, but it is an approximation, a completely valid approximation, but an approximation nonetheless that doesn't hold in all cases. So, for example, let's say that I'm timing my friend running a race. He's running one lap. He goes around. I hit the stopwatch when I see him begin the race, begin running. Okay? I'm when I take this measurement, I'm presuming that the light took no time whatsoever to reach my eyeballs. Okay? Which is a valid assumption for an approximation because it was so quick it didn't matter. Then, when he completed his lap, I clicked again and once again presumed that there was no lag time. This measurement is based on the assumption that the state of finishing the race could have acted upon the state of the second click. It's a presumption that these things happened at the same time. And once again, what does that mean? It means that these two entities were of such a state that they could have affected one another. And
Yeah,
they
this is an interesting example because if whatever the speed of light is, you would have a bias at the start of your click, and that same bias would translate to your end click, and so the difference would tend to wash out. And so, like, if you're measuring just the overall duration of the race, it doesn't really matter how long it takes, as long as it's the same, and as long as your distance to your friend isn't changing from start to finish at the start point and the finish point.
So that's good, but I'm going further than this, than
And
just
so,
talking about light delays. I'm saying
right,
that the now, when you think about what now means, simultaneity, at the same time, it only applies to things that could have acted on the entity taken as a reference. To say
I
right
I
now,
guess
when you say now, you're taking a certain entity as a reference and you're describing other entities and the way they condition or could have conditioned that particular entity.
I will not disagree with you that local causality is a way of measuring simultaneity, and it makes sense to do that. I guess I have two questions for you just to understand your thinking on this. One, when an entity goes away at any distance, does it continue to exist? Like in your view,
Of
like I
course,
feel
it
like
definitely
okay.
exists. There's no question about
Now,
that.
and if you were to know the one-way speed of light, which is a way to measure how fast a signal took from point A to point B, you think you would be able to extend the concept of simultaneity further, and it wouldn't just include local cause and effect relationships. You can then say, this light had an effect on me now, given the wave dynamics or the light dynamics. I know that it originated at this time, therefore, working backwards, a previous state I was in lines up simultaneously with this distant event. So you agree with that?
I, of course, agree that we could do that,
Okay.
but I do not see the evidence for that extended sense of simultaneity really referring to anything real or of consequence.
So do you think light has a certain set of dynamics?
It might and probably does, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. So you're not like
Well, I mean, well, a
what are the
certain
options
dynamics. I mean,
available?
yes, I think it would. I'm gonna make that stronger. Like, yeah, it has to. It has to have a certain identity.
Okay. So is light going to have a certain speed in whatever direction it's going, and
Yeah,
even the speed might change as it's like maybe gravitational influences
sure. It
go.
might be. Yeah, right, right. It might. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So if light has this property and we don't know what it is, then does that erase the fact that our ignorance erase the fact that two distant events could be simultaneous and we just don't know which set of events are simultaneous?
Again, I see what you're talking about, but I don't see exactly what this refers to when
So when you were in
now
a state of writing your
refers
book,
to like only these local events. So again, if you knew the one-way speed of light, you could extend this sense of what simultaneity means. But I'm
I
not sure
see.
what it refers to, because all that ever happens is actions between things that are next to one another.
So if you're saying that because things only affect each other locally, that whatever's happening at a distance doesn't matter. That's interesting, and I think that could still be true,
The
even
time
though
at
they might have happened
which
simultaneously.
sorry, go on. Sorry, I'm
Even
interrupting.
though they might have happened simultaneously, but and you're wondering what the utility is of even trying to understand them as simultaneous, maybe.
The lack of utility is secondary. I am pointing out the lack of utility because if you
Okay.
think about it, I'm not sure what you gain by saying that the rocket launch was simultaneous with the writing of the book. I'm not sure what you gain from that. But like the lack of utility is a purely secondary consideration. The primary thing I'm asking is like, are you sure you're identifying any actual fact of the matter when you say that? I don't I don't see it. You're extending it, you're creating this abstraction, but I don't see any evidence you're referring to a real fact there.
So I guess it kind of comes down to, is the speed of light constant for all inertial observers, or does it have a certain state? If if it's if it's constant for all inertial observers, then there is no definition. It makes no sense to talk about simultaneity. Simultaneity is relative depending on how fast you're moving, because then you use the speed of light being c for that mover, or if it's moving the other way, then you use the speed of light to c at that mover, and then you would say, okay, back when the light arrived, it was obviously going c because it's constant for my inertial observer. I can back propagate it, and the event looks like it took place or at one moment in the past, versus another observer going in the opposite direction would say, well, it took place at a different moment in the past. Um, and so, but if as the moment you say, okay, the speed of light can't be the same for all inertial observers, and it has to have some set speed, that then locks in the idea that things happened at a certain. There is no relativity simultaneity anymore. That goes away. The logical consequence of having the speed of light having a certain speed is that events happened at a certain simultaneity order. Only one. There's only one plane. I use plane, but again, not geometrically, just to understand that there isn't like shifting simultaneities. There's just a single set of simultaneity events, and and then to get to the utility, there might not be direct utility when it's like things happening here locally um, are not affected by distant events. But like if you wanted to affect the future, um, if you wanted to understand the way light behaves, it might, like in my research, and this is unfinished work, but I'm learning things that that rely on simultaneity being universal. Uh, and so the speed of light having a preferred frame and having a constant, or not a constant, a certain uh, speed, right? That has certain consequences further down the line, beyond special relativity effects. You can get into general relativistic effects, and it has consequences there that I am researching that help reveal the nature of gravity. And so, um, having that kind of understanding, then, if it's a correct understanding, a correct causal relationship between the light dynamics and gravity, well, then might bestow upon the person with that knowledge a certain power to control the future. Um, and so then it might then also allow different, let's say, planetary systems, if there's different life forms on them, to come up with a light synchronization scheme. Like, who's to say in special relativity who gets to be the primary light or time source? Who gets to be the GPS clock? Um, and so, like, there might be a way to solve disputes among different timekeeping systems that are moving at different speeds to say this is the simultaneity plane, and this is, our standard of measurement, and this is the mapping between, there would be a way to solve that. Otherwise, there'd be, you know, an arbitrary convention, and then that, like, so there might be some future utility in understanding which set of events are simultaneous at a distance and which ones are not. Um,
Yeah, when you put it that way, certainly sounds like there's utility to thinking of it this way. But think about how that utility ends up cashed out. The way that utility ends up being cashed out is in the following kinds of applications. Um, we sent a ship out to Mars. They landed, they got there safely, and then they sent a signal back to tell us they got there safely. The utility of thinking about a particular extended sense of simultaneity is the ability to predict when that signal will reach us.
right.
Not some kind of abstract notion of, oh well, the signal was actually transmitted 8 minutes before, or whatever it is. I think it's like 15 actually. It changes actually. The signal was actually transmitted 15 minutes before. Well, uh, that does so it's important to note the utility is always cashed out in terms of some local event. And
Right.
and if we found the rest frame of the ether, then it would no longer be a matter of convention for how you defined this extended sense of universal sign. Currently, in order to do this, there's a bazillion different universal senses of simultaneity that you could use, and they'd all be valid. It would just be a convention. We would just pick one. If we didn't know the rest
Right.
frame of the ether, we'd pick a certain convention of simultaneity, probably one that made the math as simple as possible, which I think special relativity does, by the way. I think that's actually a point in its favor. But side note, what special relativity needs to do is it needs to be stripped of any pretensions involving, like, oh, this actually happens simultaneously for this observer. They need to blast away the whole idea of relativity of simultaneity and instead accept a conventionality of simultaneity, of non-co-located when two events are co-located, then you can talk about the simultaneity. Everyone agrees on that, including me, and that's kind of my main point. But special relativity, I think there's a version of special relativity that can be stripped of all of its false pretensions, all of its claims to knowledge that it doesn't actually have. It needs to label many of its assumptions as pure convention. So, for example, the idea that light travels the same speed in every reference frame. That needs to be relabeled not as a physical fact, because it frickin' isn't one. It's stupid to begin with, and then also has never been proven. That needs to be relabeled as not being a physical fact, but as a convention to simplify the math. I'm totally fine with that, because we don't know what the frickin' one-way speed of light is anyway, so we might as well pick one that simplifies the math, but we gotta make sure everyone understands that it's just a convention. So if that's what... Right. So anyway, in our current state, any convention of simultaneity is fine.
Sure.
But what I'm saying is that even if you found one based on the actual rest frame of the ether and knowing the actual one-way speed of light, it still gets cashed out in terms of the time at which local action happened. So I still am skeptical of even extending the concept of the present non-locally.
So I guess there's a point in what you're saying. Like when you go take a roll for a class, are you present or absent, right? So present has a sense of spatial presence and temporal presence, and that's, I guess, what you're saying is you want to marry the two. It's a temporal and spatial present, and that's what present means. And I think that's a valid concept. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think it's, if you then the way that I'm using it is slightly different. Is what is happening right now, everywhere. And so like local present is abstracted away, and it becomes, an omitted measurement, right? So it's a different concept. And so maybe we are talking past each other on this one. And right now, maybe it only makes sense to talk about local and temporal presence, in terms of like if I want to affect me, right? I'm always local, and I can't ever leave myself, so it's always going to be local, and it's always going to be temporally present, right? So, like, if I want to control the future in a state that is beneficial for me and those that I interact with locally, then yeah, sure, let's focus in on the the definition of present that is local, spatially and temporally. Um, but I guess my point is that if is that the eternal simultaneity is just the recognition that even non-locally there is only ever things only ever exist at one moment. There's never a case where things exist in different states at the same time. And so like this relativity of simultaneity is nonsense because of that. And so it's a way at looking at the available evidence to rule out the root of relativity of simultaneity, which is that the speed of light is constant for all inertial frames, because it clashes at the moment you get to relativity of simultaneity, it clashes with evidence. Um, that's one clash. I mean, there's multiple clashes, but that's like one clash with evidence.
In
And
my
so,
view, the clash is just that the one-way speed of light has never been measured, and the idea that it goes at c with respect to every observer just violates the basic like nature of motion with respect of different things with respect to each other.
right.
It's just bonkers.
Yeah.
But you're saying you agree with me there, but then you're also saying that it violates the universal sense of the present, which has some identity, even though we
Present
don't yet know its exact identity.
limited only temporally, not spatially. Like I'm not saying the definition of present in the sentence you used isn't both spatially present and temporally
Yes.
present. It's just
Yes.
temporally
Yeah.
present.
Here's the
So
thing.
it's
I have to admit that your extended sense of the present, where we talk about it just temporally and not just spatially. I'm talking about it both spatially and temporally. That's a good way of framing it. You're talking about it just temporally. This extended sense of the present, which would be identifiable if we had the one-way speed of light.
yes,
I have to admit that it has utility because it allows you to make calculations. And even in today's world where we don't have the one-way speed of light, we we use some convention that sort of implicitly assumes some kind of universal simultaneity. Yeah, but I guess my point is it doesn't have to. Another thing I want to bring up is if I'm right, that really there is no meaning to the present other than that what's happening here now, not just now, here, also here and now. If that's what the present means and there's no such thing as just now everywhere, then maybe there is no way to find the one-way speed of light. Maybe there is no, like, maybe there's some deeper truth to this that is not consistent with the idea that there even is a one-way speed of light, that is a fact to identify. But because all facts about the present are local only, because all facts about the present are local only, there is no fact about what's happening right now at Alpha Centauri, because now only talks about here and now. There is no now across the whole universe. I'm
yeah,
open to that
it's
deeper
interesting.
possibility.
Like why is it impossible to figure out the light dynamics, the one-way speed of light?
Oh, I don't know.
It's, yeah,
I'm not
I
saying
mean,
it is.
you're.
I'm saying
I thought
what.
maybe you were suggesting because the present is only the interactions that we have, the local here, spatially present and temporally present, is the only interactions. It masks. everything at a distance in that way. Like I thought maybe that's what you're saying.
I'm saying maybe there's nothing to be masked. Like, because
Uh,
again, think about think even if we did find the one-way speed of light, and then we had some sense of like the universal sense of the present, what would that buy us? It would just buy us stuff that we already know how to do, which is to predict the nature of local events. Since there are no actions that are non-local, having knowledge of universal presentism, it doesn't buy us any causal powers that we don't already have.
that we know of. I
That
mean, there
we
might
know
be.
of. That we know of. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you're right.
there
You're
might be
right.
other
But I'm just
things.
I'm trying to make us aware of a deeper like possibility that there's a deeper truth here that doesn't that isn't that doesn't involve extending the sense of the present of here and now further.
Hmm.
That's all. I'm just trying to make us what you're saying is possible too, and then maybe once we have that universal sense of the present, then it buys us some kind of powers that we didn't have before. Totally, maybe. But also the thing I'm saying might be true too.
Yeah, my whole framework is based on universal simultaneity. Like it's a part of it. It's not like it's not based on it. It's a consequence. Once you get into a preferred frame with the speed of light having a certain set of dynamics, the consequence is temporal simultaneity across the universe. Like there's no way around it. Just
But
like
wouldn't
relativity
you
simultaneity is a consequence, and it may not
yeah.
mean it may not mean anything like locally, like whatever. Like it's not going to affect me locally because the things that are local, present, uh, spatially and temporally are the only things that are going to affect me. Um, that's possible. But looking at the time, we should probably move on to
Yeah.
a preferred frame. Is that
Now's a
a
good
good time?
time. Yeah.
Okay.
So so another disagreement we have is that you think there's a preferred frame and I don't. And I think this has to do with basically our difference in what we mean by a preferred frame.
Yep.
So let's start with our definitions. You first.
Okay. Preferred frame, I think, is uh, I originally, through my research, have defined the preferred frame as the frame in which the speed of light is isotropic in all directions. Um, and so you could have a moving preferred frame in the sense where if you look at two different points spatially, if the speed of light is slowing down only in a single direction, so like if you have like like the vector represents like magnitude and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as you go in like one direction, um, there's going to be and then if in the other direction it's the same speed no matter what, let's say
That would be pretty wacky.
plausible. Maybe there's like some weird interference in one direction but not in the other. um, then the midpoint, let's say between this point, when you take the average, like the it's actually has its own velocity. So like this like like at some point down here there'd be no velocity for the preferred frame, and the preferred frame would have a velocity here, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappears. Mostly because um, the speed is faster in one direction than it is in the other. So you have to kind of be going, you have to be going with the faster speed for the light relative to the object moving is the same in both directions. And so like I was trying to integrate this concept of the speed of light is the same in all directions with the river model that Henry Linder, did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
He was discussing. And so um, like if that's all the preferred frame means, then it's just you would have to like I guess know what the light dynamics are. And once you knew the speed of light in all directions, you can figure out okay what's the midway point. And I think I would have to extend that definition of a preferred frame being isotropic in all directions to being isotropic in opposite directions. So like you could have a case where you would have light going opposite directions faster in one direction than the other, but like the point stationary here would be the
Mhm.
preferred frame. Even though the light is not isotropic in all directions, it's moving slower in one direction versus the other, and so um, the reason for this is because at least with the Schwarzschild metric, I don't even know if I'm saying his name correctly, but the gentleman that came up with the Schwarzschild metric, the speed of light is moving slower in the radial direction than it is in the transverse direction as you get closer to an object, and so it kind of looks like we're the radial direction. Anyway, so that's all I mean by the preferred frame is that it's relative to the speed of light. The speed of light being the governing mechanism of deciding what frame is preferred. Is that it in opposite directions, the speed of light is the same, and if you have to move to make that happen, then when you move and you achieve that, you're in the preferred frame. Everything else is defined relative to that frame,
I see.
basically.
So the way I use the what so everything's defined with respect to that frame. Okay.
Yeah.
Um well, okay. So I think so okay, the way I use that the word preferred frame is where you say there's an absolute there's a such thing as absolute space, and movement with respect to absolute space, like or and absolute space constitutes that preferred frame.
I
Okay.
see.
Now you might say like, well, why would you define it that way when that's false? So like you and I both agree that there is no such thing as absolute space, that movement is relative, that position and
All
movement is always
measurements
relative.
all
Exactly.
measurements are relative.
Space isn't just a measurement though, it's a factual relationship about objects.
I see. I see. The measurement with respect to a preferred frame, I mean, it's like a spatial measurement, like a length or a distance traveled. Like it's always referenced with respect to some other. I guess it could be other object or other frame. And I guess you and I were disagreeing on this before, where like this point empty space isn't a thing. You can't measure with respect to it. And I'm like, but it's a potential. Like if a thing could be there, it could
Oh,
have
but
that
I agreed
velocity.
with you on that.
Yeah, so like we achieved some congruence there, um, and so if if a, and then I think the next step would be to then say part of measurements involve a frame, something representing the origin, something representing stationary. And since there's nothing like absolute space, like if there was an ether, is the ether moving with respect to this? Like it makes no sense. Like it makes no. It is conceptually empty. Um, and so the you have to latch on that with respect to something. Like it has to be with respect to something. And so I was using it. The preferred frame is with respect to light. Um, if you could measure the speed of one-way speed of light, it would be the frame in which light is the same speed in opposite directions.
Yeah. Here I think we should continue thinking of preferred frame as being a term used by people who think there's an absolute space and being false. And the reason is this. Now you're saying, well, if there's an ether and light is moving with respect to that ether, then that frame is preferred. Yeah,
Yes.
sure. Okay, fine. But let's say, just for the sake of argument, that light is a wave in one ether and matter is a wave in a different ether. Okay? Now you have two preferred frames. Okay? And each of them are preferred in different senses. And what I'd prefer to say is I would prefer to just say, or it's not a preference. I think we gain clarity on this issue by not calling these things preferred frames, but just by saying Motion is relative. When you're in a frame that moves with respect to the light ether, certain that will affect the physics in certain ways. When you move with respect to the matter ether, that will affect the physics in different ways. So we don't say there's a preferred frame, we simply say motion with respect to different entities causes different effects. And so there's no longer like any preference. I don't even know what the hell preference means. There's no preferences. Like, is God preferring it? Are we preferring it?
I would
Forget about all that. Let's just talk about the actions that happen when you move with respect to media.
So I guess I agree with that generally, but when I try to integrate it with like epistemological principles, the like I feel like the concept should grow with knowledge, right? Like it's a file folder and it should grow. And the knowledge I have right now is that motion with respect to light is the only thing that has an effect right now. I don't know of a matter ether, right? I don't know of a like what difference does. In fact, like I know that matter takes on certain properties with respect to its motion with respect to light. So like I'm willing to say that I am only this definition only applies in contexts, a delimited context in which light is the only motion with respect to light is the only thing that happens to matter, uh, and then you would have to come up with a different framework, different concept to include a new reference frame. Like if motion with respect to two different things matter, then and their relative motions matter, then you can expand it and generalize it from there. But like given the available evidence, like I see your point. Like yeah, we could uh, generalize it to include all these other possibilities that we don't have evidence for. But I would be hesitant to do that until we do have evidence. Like I don't think my definition closes the door to that. It's just looking at the available evidence today.
Yeah, so I brought in this possibility of like a second medium or something, but you don't have to do that. I could just say, well, motion with respect to our sun is preferred in a certain way because motion with respect to this or your position with respect to the sun is what determines your gravitational force as caused by the sun. So
Yes,
that's a goofy way of saying it. I prefer to just say that motion and position with respect to the different entities, whatever they may be, like that has different causes.
I see. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And the motion of the sun with respect to light in its preferred frame is going to have a certain effect as well. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't see any issues with that because like if you have your motion with respect to the sun and then your sun with respect to that, then you have the systematic effects. And so yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's
Cool.
that's correct.
So it sounds like we've come to an agreement on this idea of preferred frame that we should relegate that term
It depends
to
on the context,
describing
right?
the well, I mean, it's not just semantics, it's like just how are we going to use these terms to clearly identify everything and like there's better and worse semantics. So like if we keep that term as a term of a faulty point of view where we think there's a such thing as absolute motion and we refer only to motion with respect to different important things, whether that thing is the sun or the medium that carries light, whatever it is, we talk about motion with respect to that thing. We don't talk about preferred frame because that really makes it sound like it's this intrinsic thing.
Well, what I guess then what term should I use? At least when I'm just like in my research, I'm trying to write papers. Like,
I talk about it as the now, and this will lead to our final disagreement. Although it sounds like maybe we don't disagree on this anymore. But so I talk about just the frame of the ether. So you're asking what term should you use? I guess that would depend on what your view is on this last issue, which is, do you think we now have a proof of the existence of the ether? What's your position on that now?
yeah, I think the jury's still out on it. It's mostly because I interact with light. I don't interact with the thing light is moving with, and so I I feel like there's like this barrier that on the other side is just no information, and so I don't, and I and I'm like I'm not entirely familiar with your method of induction either. Like I'm working through the New Organon first, and then I'll be working through your work. I work through Ron's definition of um, induction, and I took it as a means to validate causality. And then I've always worked with what do you do now that once you have causality, like you can look at the method of difference and method of agreement and find inductions that way, and that's what
let
I've
me
always
take a quick.
used.
I muted myself on. Let me take a quick. Let me tell the audience real quick. Dan is referring to Ron Pizzaturo's book, A Validation of Knowledge, where my mentor Ron, he reproves knowledge inductively by observation from the ground up, proving very important concepts like entity, causality. He has a method of induction that comes from this, which I think is very correct. How do we know that we are looking at the real existence and not just a figment of our imaginations? He answers all of these fundamental philosophic questions, and that's a validation of knowledge. I'll put that I'll put that link in the description as well. So go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, we've got like a minute left, according to my hard
Oh,
stop time. But I guess I'll just say the jury's still out. Like I'm open
okay,
to it. It's just not something that I feel like I need to come to a conclusion on, because the evidence proves it. Like, proof to
right,
me means like to deny it would contradict either observations or prior knowledge,
right.
um, and I don't know that I've achieved that personally. So
Okay.
it might just be my own context limiting me.
Let me I'm gonna frame what you just said, and you can tell me if I'm understanding you properly. So what I'm hearing is you're reading some books on epistemology, and it's in preparation for understanding my book on epistemology, my theory of induction. And you can tell by looking at my inferences that prove the existence of the ether, you can tell that I'm reasoning from a prior structure of knowledge, basically, that you haven't read and you're not sure if you agree with it. And I think what I'm hearing is that you're properly skeptical. You're basically saying, look, based on these deductions James is making, if it all hinges on his prior like foundations, and if his prior foundations are just a little bit off, then all of this is rationalism. Then all of this is just deductions floating in the air, and they sound generally right, but I need to understand that foundation 100% for myself before I buy it. I can't argue with that. Yeah. So I'm glad
No,
that's your position, because there's a sense in which I agree with that position on a level that's even deeper than those who already agree with me, because a lot of them agree with me without having read my theory of induction. So,
right.
any last statements before I let you go, Dan?
Let's keep inducing, right? Like let's facts first, and methods on those facts are important. So go as far as the evidence suggests and no further.
Fantastic. Thank you for a productive debate, and I'll have you on the show again soon.
Thanks, James. I appreciate it.
See you, dude.
Bye.